This Christmas they called and said, "We're family, come home and celebrate with us." 8 years of silence, not a single check-in. And now they want a family reunion? I'm not the naive child I once was. A surprise awaits them. I was standing in my small kitchen in Asheville, North Carolina, cradling a steaming cup of coffee, when my phone buzzed on the table. A Facebook message popped up from my mother, Linda Carter. "Isabella, your father and I would love for you, Jake and Ethan to come home to Raleigh for Christmas this year. It's been so long, sweetheart." I nearly spilled my coffee on the hardwood floor. Seriously? 8 years without a single call, not one message, and now they wanted to play happy family? I stared out the window at the misty Blue Ridge Mountains standing quiet and steady, and wondered if this was some kind of sick joke. My kitchen, normally a peaceful space, still carrying the faint scent of the toast Jake made this morning, suddenly felt invaded. I typed out a vague response. "I'll think about it, might be busy," but in my head, a storm of questions was already raging. What do they want? Why now after all these years? I'm Isabella Carter, 27 years old, living with my husband, Jake Bennett, 29, and our 1-year-old son, Ethan, in a small white house on the outskirts of Asheville. I work as a freelance graphic designer, mostly making logos and book covers, while Jake is a software engineer who works remotely from the corner of our living room surrounded by a mess of cables. Ethan is at his most mischievous stage, crawling everywhere, knocking over anything within reach. We're not rich, but we're happy. The kind of simple happiness I never thought I deserved after the chaos of my past. Last week, I found out I was pregnant again. Just 8 weeks in, and Jake grinned like an idiot all day when I told him. But then, that message from my mother hit me like a rock thrown into the calm lake of my life. Jake caught me staring at my phone and said, "If you want to go, I'll stay with Ethan. No way am I letting the kids get dragged into whatever play they're staging this time." I nodded, but my mind was a tangled mess. My best friend Sarah told me to post about it online and get opinions from strangers. I scoffed. I'd have to be crazy to ask random people on the internet. But here I am, pouring my heart out to all of you because honestly, I feel completely lost. To understand why I'm so conflicted, you need to know about the family I came from. I'm the youngest of 4 siblings. My dad, Robert, 54. My mom, Linda, 52. My older brother, James, 31. My sister, Rachel, 28. And my twin sister, Olivia, the same age as me. We grew up in Raleigh, in a 2-story suburban house with a perfectly manicured lawn and an American flag hanging by the front door. The kind of perfect family you'd see on TV. Dad was a former college football star at UNC, tall and broad with salt and pepper hair, always reliving his glory days through endless stories. Mom was a PT teacher who used to coach the high school girls volleyball team. James played basketball, Rachel was a track star, and Olivia inherited Mom's volleyball talent. And me? I like to paint. Watercolors, pencil sketches, anything that let me create. My parents called it a silly hobby. Between the ages of 14 and 16, I poured my soul into 15 different art exhibitions, each piece a reflection of who I was. My parents showed up exactly once and only after I begged them in tears over the phone. "Stop being so dramatic, Isabella," Mom snapped whenever I complained. They never forgot James's games or Rachel's meets, but me? I was the ghost kid, fed and clothed, but invisible where it mattered most. It stung like hell, and I carried that bitterness like a backpack full of bricks through every year that followed. But that wasn't even the reason they cut me off. The real gut punch came when I was 15 and started dating Ryan Miller, a boy from my class with a killer smile and eyes that made me forget how to breathe. After a few months I brought him home for dinner. I was nervous but they seemed to like him. My parents were friendly. Olivia even teased. "Not bad, Em. You actually landed a decent one." And for a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, I had finally done something right. I was young, but I dreamed of a future with Ryan. So naive it's almost laughable now. Nearly 2 years later, my world collapsed. It was a rainy afternoon when my friend Chloe pulled me aside at school, her voice hushed. "I saw Ryan at the park last night," she whispered, "with Olivia. And they weren't just hanging out, they kissed." I didn't believe her until I confronted Ryan after school. He hung his head, admitting he'd been cheating on me for months, and worse with Olivia, my twin sister. "I loved you at first," he said. "But with Olivia, it's just stronger." My heart didn't shatter because of Ryan. It shattered because of Olivia, the one person who was supposed to be part of me, the one I had shared every secret with. I stood there in the freezing rain, water dripping down my face, feeling like my chest had been ripped open. Not just by Ryan's betrayal, but by Olivia twisting the knife. The rain couldn't wash away that pain. And as I dragged myself home, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The rain was still pounding in my ears as I stormed into the house that night, my soaked shoes squeaking against the hardwood floor. Olivia was lounging on the couch in the living room, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. "What the hell did you do with Ryan?" I shouted, my voice cracking. She barely flinched, just looked up and smirked. "You're overreacting, Zalavella. Feelings aren't something you can control. You know that?" My vision went red, not just from those words, but from years of being dismissed, overlooked, treated like I didn't matter. It all ignited like a match struck against dry wood. I stepped forward and slapped her, hard. The sharp crack echoed through the room as Olivia tumbled back onto the couch, clutching her face, her wide eyes filled with shock. I froze, my hands stinging, knowing I had crossed a line. But in that moment, I didn't care. Mom and Dad came rushing in from the kitchen, their voices overlapping in a furious chorus. "Isabella, have you lost your mind?" James thundered down the stairs, grabbing my arm and yanking me back, while Rachel stood by the doorway, staring at me with cold detachment like I was a stranger. The room erupted into chaos, shouting, the crash of a lamp hitting the floor, the pounding of my own heartbeat so loud I could barely hear anything else. I had struck the match, and now the whole house was on fire. A few hours later, after the fight had settled and Olivia had retreated upstairs with an ice pack pressed to her face, my parents called me into the dining room. The dim yellow light cast sharp shadows over their stern faces. Dad sat at the head of the table staring at me with a glare that could cook glass. "You could be charged as an adult for assaulting your sister," he said, his voice cold and measured. "But we're not getting the police involved. Instead, you're going to Charlotte to live with your Aunt Susan. We're not letting this mess tarnish our family's reputation." My mouth fell open. They didn't ask what happened, didn't care how Ryan and Olivia had betrayed me. To them, I was the problem, the outcast child that needed to be removed to keep up their picture-perfect American family image. I scoffed internally. Oh, of course, wouldn't want the black sheep ruining their next Christmas card. 2 days later, I was shoved into the back of Dad's pickup truck with nothing but a single suitcase. No heartfelt goodbyes, no second chances. Olivia didn't even look at me as I left. She just sat there, pressing the ice pack to her cheek like I was the only one at fault. I arrived in Charlotte on a gloomy afternoon, the sky as gray as my mood. Aunt Susan, 48, greeted me at the door with a tight hug and a warm smile. She lived with her husband, Uncle David, in a small apartment filled with books and plants. That first night they sat with me over takeout pizza, explaining why they had cut ties with the family years ago. She had come out as gay after college, and my grandparents, along with my parents, disowned her. "Our family sure loves disowning people," she said with a sharp laugh. The following week, I started at a new high school, a massive brick building where no one knew my name or the baggage I carried, and I threw myself into starting over. But those first nights, I cried myself to exhaustion in a bed that wasn't mine. Aunt Susan would sit beside me, running her fingers through my hair, whispering, "You don't need them to prove your worth." At first, I didn't believe her. I felt too broken, too damaged. But over time, little by little, I realized she was right. I used to cry because they abandoned me. But then I decided they weren't worth another tear. From there, I clawed my way up. I got into the University of North Carolina at Asheville, studied graphic design, and was determined to stand on my own. In my sophomore year, I met Jake at a student art exhibit. He was standing in front of my watercolor painting, a misty mountain landscape, and said, "Color painting, a misty mountain landscape," and said, "Whoever painted this must be pretty deep." I laughed. Or just really into mountains. We dated, fell in love, and got married 3 years ago in a small ceremony at a park near our home. When planning the wedding, I thought about inviting my family but told myself no, they don't deserve to be there on my happy day. Ethan came along a year ago, a squirming bundle of chaos and love, and we scraped together enough to buy our little house here. A sanctuary where I finally felt like I belonged. I'd rebuilt my life from the ashes, brick by stubborn brick, and figured the past was dead and buried. That is until Mum's stupid message last week dragged it all back up, kicking and screaming into the light. That message from Mum had been gnawing at me ever since I'd shoved it to the back of my mind after moving to Asheville, determined to leave the past where it belonged, buried under 8 years of dust. But now, sitting on our beat-up armchair with its faded blue cushions, I couldn't shake it. I'd posted the whole messy saga online late last night, half expecting nothing but radio silence, only to wake up to a flood of comments from strangers. "Don't go, they don't deserve you. Christmas is for the people who actually care about you." I sat in the armchair scrolling through the comments, sipping my warm coffee as I watched Jake play with Ethan on the rug and thought, they're right. Why should I drag myself back to Raleigh for people who tossed me aside like yesterday's trash? I picked up my phone and typed out a reply to my mother. "Thanks for the invite, but I'll be staying in Asheville with Jake and Ethan." I expected pushback, something like, "You're being selfish, Isabella," but instead they replied, "We respect your decision. Hope we can see you after the holidays." Too easy, almost straight. I let out a dry laugh, muttering under my breath. They never made time for me before, so why should I throw away my Christmas for them? Jake and Ethan were my real family now, And with this tiny life growing inside me, I wasn't about to drag us into whatever disaster they had planned. But that calm, polite response stuck with me, like a splinter under my skin, whispering that something wasn't right. That night, I opened my laptop, clicking around like some amateur detective. I pulled up my brother James's Facebook, now an investment banker in Raleigh, 2 sons, a massive house. His profile picture in a tailored suit looked straight out of a magazine ad. Next was Rachel's profile. She was a nurse, divorced a few years back from some cheating asshole, now raising a daughter on her own. Then Olivia, oh, she married Ryan right after high school, had 2 kids, and bought a suburban house last year. Clearly, money wasn't an issue. Dad had just posted a picture of his new sports car, probably going through a midlife crisis. Mom's page was filled with charity galas and community awards. Her perfect mother act cranked up to 11. I sat there staring at the screen, asking myself why now? Money? No. They were all richer than me. A kidney or something? Maybe. But Olivia was my twin. She'd be a better match. Ethan? But they already had grandkids. The suspicion in my gut started burning like a fresh wound. The next morning, I called Aunt Susan. She picked up, her voice raspy over the line. Hey kid. What's going on? I told her everything. She laughed dryly. They never change, do they? Then her tone shifted, turning serious. She said Grandpa Henry, 79, had been asking about me lately, whether I was married, if I had kids. She confronted him. Why do you care now after siding with Olivia and the rest of them when they cut her off? That's when he admitted it. My family had told him I cheated on Ryan with his best friend. And when I got caught, I attacked Olivia in a jealous rage. Grandpa was a devout man, hated infidelity, and believed them without question. I froze, my mouth hanging open before I shouted into the phone. They made up a whole damn story just to paint me as the villain. I can't believe this family. Susan wasn't done. She said Grandpa had issued an ultimatum. Either they apologized and invited me home for Christmas, or they'd be cut out of his will. He was a millionaire, and that was the real reason behind their sudden change of heart. I let out a bitter laugh. Money, of course. What else could it possibly be? I didn't waste a second after hanging up. I blocked my parents' messages, deleted James and Rachel's friend requests, and blocked Olivia's number, even though she hadn't even bothered to text. I sat on the couch, my hands shaking, feeling both relieved and so furious I could barely breathe. They've been dead to me for 8 years, I muttered. And now they're just walking corpses looking for money. I didn't need their fake apologies, didn't need the flimsy illusion of family they were trying to rebuild just because of a will. I looked out the window, watching the snow drift softly over the Asheville Mountains, and told myself, I just need them out of my life for good. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over, not that easily. 2 days after Christmas, I was in our living room stringing tinsel on the scraggly little pine tree we'd hauled home from the lot down the road. Ethan was napping upstairs, and Jake was humming some off-key carol in the kitchen, the smell of his attempt at gingerbread wafting through the house. I just reached up to hang a glittery star, when a sharp, twisting pain ripped through my stomach so fierce I dropped the ornament and doubled over. Clutching the arm of the couch, Jake bolted in, his face paling as he saw me crumpled there. What's wrong? He stammered, hands hovering like he didn't know where to put them. I couldn't stand, couldn't breathe, right? Just gasped. Call Laura through gritted teeth. My sister-in-law, Laura, all of 30 and cool-headed as ever, screeched up in her beat-up sedan 10 minutes later. And she and Jake half carried me into the back seat as the icy Asheville wind sliced through my coat. At the hospital, the doctor's face told me everything before she even spoke. Those soft, pitying eyes I'll never forget. I'm so sorry, Isabella, she said quietly. You've had a miscarriage. We need to operate now. Hours later, I woke up in a sterile white room, groggy and sore. Jake's hand wrapped around mine, his eyes bloodshot and glistening. We lost it, he whispered, voice breaking. I nodded, tears spilling hot down my cheeks, unstoppable. Like a dam I didn't know I'd been holding back. The physical ache was nothing compared to the hollow void inside me, like a piece of my soul had been carved out and left bleeding. Complications kept me there 2 more days, flat on my back in that stiff bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, trying to be strong for Ethan, for Jake, but crumbling every time the lights dimmed and the silence crept in. We got home just before New Year's, and I was still moving slow, like my body hadn't caught up with my brain. I was in the kitchen that afternoon, January 3rd, fumbling with the kettle to make tea, something to warm the chill that wouldn't leave me, when my work phone buzzed on the counter, another unknown number. I sighed, figuring it was a client hassling me about a late logo draft, and picked up with a clipped, "Hello, this is Isabella." The raspy voice on the other end stopped me cold. "Isabella, it's Grandpa Henry." My heart thudded, the kettle slipping from my grip to clatter into the sink. Henry Carter, 79, a man I hadn't spoken to since I was a kid. How do you even get this number? Probably my freelance site, I realized, cursing myself for not locking it down tighter. His tone was shaky, almost frail. I'm so sorry, girl, for not reaching out these past 8 years. I missed your graduation, your wedding, the day that boy of yours was born. I regret it all. I stood there, clutching the cold mug I'd pulled from the cabinet, my tea forgotten, not sure whether to hang up or listen. He went on, saying he was disgusted with what my parents and siblings had done, how they'd twisted the truth and then dropped the bombshell. I'm putting you back in my will, Isabella. You deserve it more than they do. I snorted, a bitter little laugh escaping me. He's laying it on thick, I thought. But I'd done trusting anyone with the last name Carter. I was half tempted to give him a chance. Maybe he was different until he opened his mouth again and lit the fuse. We'd been talking maybe 10 minutes, me mostly grunting responses while he rambled, when he veered into dangerous territory. I've got to say though, he said, his voice hardening, it disappoints me that Ethan doesn't carry the Carter name. Family legacy ought to mean something, you know. I froze, the mug trembling in my hand, a red haze creeping into my vision. What did you say? I cut in, low and sharp, giving him a chance to back off. He didn't. It's a shame, that's all. The name should have stayed, that was it. 8 years of abandonment, a lifetime of their garbage, and now this old man thought he could waltz in and judge my family. I exploded. You've got some nerve, I shouted into the phone, thinking you get to criticize me after everything your precious family put me through. I paced the kitchen, legal reasons. Not that it's your business and you don't get a vote, you controlling old bastard. Take your dirty money and shove it, he stuttered. Now, Isabella didn't mean, but I was done. No, you don't get to backtrack now, I snapped, tears stinging my eyes as I laughed, harsh and jagged. You think a check can buy me back after you all left me for dead? That's hilarious. I slammed the phone down on the counter so hard the screen cracked, my breath ragged, a wild mix of fury and freedom surging through me, like I'd just smashed through a wall I'd been banging my head against for years. I slid down to the kitchen floor, back pressed against the cabinets, the cold tiles seeping through my jeans as I hugged my knees. Their call, on top of losing the baby, felt like the universe testing how much I could take before I broke. But I wouldn't. I don't need his money, I murmured to the empty room, and I sure as hell don't need them. If Grandpa Henry followed through and stuck me in his will, I'd donate every cent to the women's shelter downtown. Let it do some good instead of lining the pockets of that greedy clan. But knowing him, it was probably just hot air, another empty card, a promise. I wasn't naive enough to think this was the end though. They'd sniffed out $1 million carrot, and people like that don't slink away quietly. They dig, they pry. Maybe even hire some shady pie to track me down. I could picture Mum wringing her hands at a charity brunch plotting her next move, or James flexing his banker connections to find my address. Let them try, I thought, my jaw tightening. They step one foot into my world again, and I'll show them I'm not the pushover they dumped 8 years ago. I holed myself up, brushing off the ache in my legs, and peered out the window. Jake was out back, pushing Ethan on the tiny swing set we'd built last summer, his laughter ringing through the crisp air as snow dusted his coat. My heart clenched, not from pain this time, but from something fiercer. This is my family, I vowed silently, pressing a hand to the glass, and I'll fight tooth and nail to keep it safe. Whatever storm was brewing, I'd face it head on. Because after all this, I knew I was stronger than they'd ever given me credit for. After that blowout with Grandpa Henry, I was done letting my family's chaos seep into my world. I'd slammed the door shut, but I wasn't naive enough to think they'd stay on the other side without a fight. The next morning, Jake and I sat cross-legged on the living room floor, Ethan babbling between us as we sorted his toy cars into a messy pile, and decided it was time to batten down the hatches. We locked our Facebook accounts tighter than a bank vault, flipping everything to private. Photos of Ethan's first steps, Jake's goofy birthday posts, my artsy sketches. All of it off limits. Jake's parents followed suit, texting us, "We're not dealing with that circus either," and I couldn't help but grin at their solidarity. Later, I plopped into our sagging armchair, staring at the scattered chaos of Ethan's toys, little trucks and blocks strewn across the rug like a toddler war zone, and let out a dry laugh. They could hire the damn FBI to hunt me down, I muttered. And I still wouldn't give a rat's ass. I tapped out of every social media app on my phone, deleting the icons one by one. Not because I was scared, but because I needed a freaking break. For the first time in weeks, my phone went silent, no pings or buzzes, and it felt like I'd clawed my way out of a storm into still air. But I knew my family too well. James with his moneybag swagger, Rachel with her icy calculations, Olivia with her sly little games. They weren't the type to shrug and walk away from a millionaire's pot of gold. I leaned back, smirking to myself. Bring it on, jerks. I'm ready for whatever you've got. The days after that were a slog though, heavier than I'd expected. I'd catch myself on the couch some afternoons watching Ethan stack his wooden blocks into wobbly towers, his tiny tongue poking out in concentration, and out of nowhere, tears would burn my eyes. Losing the baby wasn't just a punch, it was a freight train I hadn't seen coming. I'd spent quiet moments imagining her. Yeah. I'd decided it was a girl with Jake's hazel eyes and maybe my stubborn streak, a little shadow chasing Ethan around the yard. Now she was gone, and the emptiness gnawed at me, a dull ache that flared up when I least expected it. Jake was my rock though. He'd shuffle in with a mug of chamomile tea when he saw my face go blank, or wrap me in his arms late at night when the tears hit, murmuring, "We'll get through this, Em, I swear." He was my anchor, the one constant I could cling to when everything else felt like quicksand. One evening, after Ethan was tucked in, I sat at the kitchen table doodling aimlessly on a napkin and told Jake, "I'm thinking about seeing someone, a therapist maybe, not because I'm falling apart, but because I want to be solid for you and him." He squeezed my hand, nodding, "Whatever you need, babe." I forced a smile, thinking, I can't let myself crumble. Not now, not when they need me. But God, some nights, alone in the dark, with the house creaking around me, I wanted to scream at the universe for piling on so much crap. First my family, then this. It wasn't fair, but I'd learned fair was a fairy tale a long time ago. A week later, I found myself holed up in my little home office, the desk littered with half-finished sketches, logos for a local brewery, a poster for a friend's band. The quiet gave me space to think, and as I traced lazy circles on a scrap of paper, it hit me hard. Family isn't about blood. Mine had treated me like garbage, shoved me aside, spun lies to justify the selfishness. But I'd risen from that dumpster fire stronger than they'd ever dreamed. "They're not dragging me back down," I whispered, my voice firm, like I was daring the ghosts of Raleigh to try. I chuckled darkly, picturing them. Mom clutching her pearls at some fundraiser, Dad polishing his ego mobile, James and Rachel scheming over cocktails, Olivia batting her lashes for sympathy, all of them clawing at Grandpa's cash. Let them rip each other apart like vultures over that money, I thought. I'm out. The real lesson was crystal clear. I get to pick my people. Jake, Ethan, Aunt Susan with her warm hugs and sharp wit, Uncle David with his terrible dad jokes. They were my tribe, the ones who'd earned their place. The rest? They were shadows, echoes of a life I'd outgrown, and I'd bolted the door against them years ago. No key, no entry, end of story. One chilly evening, as January stretched into its bleak middle, Jake and I bundled up and stepped onto the back porch. Ethan snuggled between us in a puffy jacket that made him look like a marshmallow. Snow fell in soft, lazy flakes, blanketing the mountains in the distance, and Ethan squealed, reaching out with mittened hands to catch one, his giggles cutting through the crisp air. Jake slid his fingers through mine, his grip steady and warm. "We're gonna be okay, right?" he asked, his breath fogging in the cold. I looked at him, his messy hair dusted with snow, his eyes soft but sure, and felt a glow spread through me, thawing the edges of my battered heart. "Yeah," I said, squeezing back. "We're gonna be just fine." I didn't know what the future held. Maybe my family would dig up some new scheme, track me down with letters or lawyers, force me to face them again. But standing there with Ethan's weight against my chest and Jake's hand in mine, I knew I'd guard this little world of ours with everything I had. I turned to the imaginary crowd I'd been spilling my guts to online, a wry smile tugging at my lips. "Thanks for sticking with me through this saga, folks. It's been a hell of a ride, longer than a bad movie you can't turn off. Here's to a new year with less drama than mine." I laughed. A real one this time, and followed Jake back inside, the porch door clicking shut behind us. The past stayed out there in the snow, maybe not gone for good, but for now, I was leaving it behind where it belonged. If this story struck a chord with you, show your support with a like, and don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Story for more gripping tales of justice, betrayal, and redemption. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment and share your own experiences. Every word you write helps build a strong, connected community where we can all share, heal, and empower one another. Stay tuned for even more intense, thought-provoking stories coming soon. We're here to bring you the best, packed with emotion, drama, and the sweet taste of karma. See you in the next one.